And we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad to be back with you. We are focusing on mental health. We have focused on mental health. We had some awesome guests already. We had an awesome guest, Curtis, who talked about marriage and all things. So check that out. Make sure you guys go to my YouTube where all my interviews are and subscribe, and share. Sharing is caring.
Mhm.
So I'm so
Yes.
excited about this interview today with my girl, Christy Greene. Christy is my travel partner. We serve together in our ministry. She's also one of my closest friends, and she happens to be a licensed counselor. Woo!
Woo!
So I want to talk about her and all the wonderful work that she's doing. She's also an author, and we'll talk about that in a minute too, about her journey in writing this book about the pandemic. It was a children's book. She has a heart for children and the youth, and I mean, children just love her. Literally, I don't. They love her. Okay, like she's the baby whisperer, the child whisperer, the youth whisperer.
That's good.
And yes, we have had many great experiences together traveling and seeing the world, and we have more to go, Christy. So,
Yeah.
without further ado, I want to introduce my girl, my friend Christy Greene. How are you doing today,
I'm
sis?
doing good. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited.
Yes, yes, excited. We always have these very deep conversations, and so hopefully
Yes.
today we get to let the world in on some of our deep emotional conversations.
Because they missed a
That
lot.
Yes, yes, right. We could have right. They miss a lot, exactly. But I want to first talk about your work, right, as a counselor and mental health, and your love for the youth. I know those are like two separate things, but
Hmm.
what made you want to get into counseling, and why do you have such a heart for people with mental health issues, especially youth?
I would say my mother was always somebody with like a big heart. So our house was always like a safe haven. So
Mm-hmm.
growing up, I can probably only remember maybe out of my 17 years I lived with my mama, maybe 4 or 5 where we didn't have somebody else, like another family or somebody else living with us. Like my mom was always that person with that big heart that was always reaching out to people, helping people on the
Mm-hmm.
holidays. She was doing the donations. So she kind of like
Wow.
poured her heart into me. And I said, I had started working in technology and I
Yeah.
was miserable. I had got my degree in business and I was like, okay, I'm gonna make some money. I'm gonna work in technology. Mind you, I'm really not good with technology. But I said, it pays pretty good. I started working in technology. I worked at the company for about 2 months. I did so terrible that they paid me to quit. They literally paid me 2 weeks and said, you don't have to come back. And that was pretty much my breaking point. I said, well, you know what? This really isn't me. I said, the money, there's no passion here. The money and the passion, they have to kind of go together. I
Yes.
can't have a job and yeah, I'm making money, but I'm miserable. Every day I go to work, every day I wake up, I'm like, man, I don't want to go there. I don't want to be around these people. This job is pointless, but y'all pay me well.
Yes. Yes.
So I
Yes.
just remember that day when I got fired. I literally cried. I was working in Reston, so mind you, I was living in Silver Spring. I was driving to Reston, and if you know anything about traffic, it's the worst traffic in the world. So it took me an hour and a half to get there to work. It took me an hour and a half to get home, and on top of that, my car's AC had went out, and it was the middle of summer.
Wow.
And I'm already mad because I don't want to be there.
Yeah.
So I just remember that day when they fired me, and I just went driving home, and I didn't drive home. I drove to my friend Martine's house, and she lived in Laurel at the time, which is
Right.
about 15 minutes from Silver Spring. And I was just crying. I was like, Martine, I can't do this job. I said, I really want to do something that matters. And so me and her, we kind of were like brainstorming together, and I was like, you know what? I should do like social work or therapy. I said because I've always cared about working with people and just somehow so that I can make an impact. So that's when I started Morgan State University. And since then, I've like, my job is something that I love doing. So, and they paid me like 5 times more than what I thought was
See?
a good salary.
I love that because sometimes we get into things because we think it's good for us. And then if we get into our passion, we'll eventually make the money that we want to make, right? You do your own kind of private practice thing, but then you also work with other practices. I love that. I love what you're doing. And I love the fact because it fits you. You're like, you are dedicated to your clients, you're dedicated to your service. And I asked my other girlfriend the other night when I interviewed her, Stacy, who's also a counselor, how do you separate the emotional weight that comes with counseling so that way you're able to live your life, you know what I'm saying, without taking on some of the client's weight, right? Some of the emotional baggage that comes with counseling. How are you able to deal with that?
For the most part, I think the best strategy for that is prayer.
Yeah.
So like I spend a lot of time in prayer, and on top of that, like it's almost like I have built up a tolerance. Once you see a lot of things, it's in a sense it's kind of unhealthy, but I have built up a tolerance to where I've seen so much and I've heard so much to where it does not, it's sad, but it does not affect me the same, you know? And then I kind of like
compartmentalize. Yeah.
Such a hard word to say. My feelings. So in the moment, I deal with whatever's going on, and I try and have times to where I have times where I do process what just happened, but I have times where I make sure that I'm not focused on what just happened. I'm focused on whatever's currently happening, not what just happened. I handle that in a moment, and I handle situations in a moment.
That's what I like that. Yeah, it can be kind of, you're right, like bad in a way because you kind of like become emotion, right? You become emotionless in everything, right? Not in
Yes.
just clients. And there's times when you need that emotion, right? Especially in relationships and things like that. You need that emotion expressed. So I love that. I
And
love the
so my
fact that
sister's like, like what you said, that's like a problem. So my sister, she's always calling me, and she's always saying something like, Christy, this and this and this and that. And I'm always like kind of like tough on her because I'm like, no, we're not going to do this. And she's like, you just don't care. But I'm like, I do care, but that's not how we're going to approach things. We're not going to be emotional, like kind of just address whatever you can. And then if you can't address it, then don't hold on to it.
Yeah, that's good. Is there a time that the counselor needs counseling?
All the time.
Yeah.
I need a lot of counseling. That's why I got you. I got Miss Latoya.
Yeah, that's right.
Rochelle. I have a support system.
Yes,
I need
I mean,
counseling.
for real, your girls should be your main support system. I
Yes,
must say,
and I
that's
got a
important.
counselor.
Yes,
He won't see me, like he's constantly booked up, so he sees me like every 2 months.
oh gosh, he must be good, man.
Yeah, I mean, he all right.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I also it's the support system is necessary, and I'm glad to be a part of that support system. Like you are my support system, right? I mean, you're another person that I have to get a bill from for like at the end of my life. She's gonna come to me with an invoice. These are all the free counseling hours I gave you that I'm charging you for. So I love that. But I want to move on to your heart for the youth, right? You work with the youth at the church, but I've seen you work with them in so many different areas, and you really have feel like you have a calling and a purpose to work with the youth. Where did that come from, and why are you so passionate about the youth?
I feel like because they are foundation starters. So I feel like if we start with the youth and we give them a good solid foundation, then that's how we
Go
make
ahead, Christy.
change.
You can it
Can you hear
blacked
me?
out, but I can still hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Charlotte, can you hear me?
So I don't know if you can hear me, but
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can't see if you answered that question. So Christy, you said you feel like it.
Let's see, count it off.
I can't hear you. Let me see.
I wonder why. Because I got all my bars.
Hold on 1 second. Just pause 1 second. Let me get this right.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Let's see if I can make sure my wife.
Okay, I can see you now, Christy.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can see and hear you. Yeah.
All
Sorry
right. Did you
about
hear
that.
anything? Because I could like hear you and you couldn't hear me, and I could see
Yes,
you,
it's
but you
okay. We're
couldn't see
good.
me.
Okay, what were you saying about the youth?
I was saying that they are the foundation of our world. So I feel
Yes.
like, and I just have a passion for kids because I feel like if we start depositing what they need into them at the young age that they are, then they can pour out, into the
Mm-hmm.
world what the world needs. So I always,
Yeah.
everything starts with the kids.
So good.
That's how
I
we
agree
make
with that.
generational blessings with kids.
Yeah, excellent. I agree with that. Like everything starts with the kids. That's so true. Our whole yeah, everything that we do starts with the youth, right? They are the future for
Hmm.
real. I believe the children are future. That was my song, but it's
Yeah.
so true. They are our future. So we got to keep
Hmm.
that in mind. I love that. I want to talk about your book that you wrote, right? You wrote a
Hmm.
children's book about the coronavirus. What was it like writing it and what made you write it?
God, I feel like He just placed it on my heart because I was working with so many kids, and at the time, they were just scared about the pandemic, and they were just asking me a bunch of questions. And honestly, I didn't have all the answers because the pandemic was so new, and
Hmm.
nobody had any answers. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna look and get some answers, and I'm gonna write this book. And you even helped me edit it, which I
Yes.
appreciate. And Miss Latoya's daughter did some beautiful artwork. So I was like, just to encourage kids, the coronavirus is, nothing compared to us.
Coronavirus. You
So it's
better
called,
run.
yes, you better run. We're in control.
That's right.
Well, let me show you some of the beautiful artwork. Look at this. It's the first hand drawn book that's on TBN.
Yes, I love it. This is a Christian
And
TBN
mind
book.
you, she's only 14 and she's
Yeah.
a published, what do you call it? Illustrator on TBN.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Shout out to Latoya's daughter for doing the artwork and taking it so
Yeah.
seriously. We got to get our youth motivated while they have, this is their moment. We got to
Mm-hmm.
get them going and really get them inspired to do great work. So I love the fact that we're, trying to utilize them and to making them know how great they are. I mean, if I could go back and know who I am now from when
Mm-hmm.
when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, oh gosh, my life would be totally different. Right? But
Yeah.
I had to go through the process of discovering who I was. And so it's so important that we feed the youth what we want to see out of them. That's one thing my mom taught me. We need to feed what we want to see come out of them. So we want
Mm-hmm.
them to exhibit love,
Absolutely.
we got to show love, we got to feed love. If we want to exhibit, no matter what we're seeing, if we want to exhibit, we want them to exhibit joy, we got to show them joy. So I love that. I want to talk about moments in your life that you had epiphanies or something that's really transformed you, that was like life changing to you, that you looked up and was like, wow, I know God was in that.
I would say just working in Baltimore City, it's a lot of violence, a lot of crime.
Yeah.
And I deal with a lot of people that, a lot of grief, a lot of sexual abuse. And I just feel like through it all, I see God keeping my clients.
Yeah.
Like I know I have one client that was involved in pretty much a double homicide in her house. And she's pretty much inside the house. Other two people are murdered and she happens to come out the house. And I'm like, how rare is that happens?
Yeah.
And then I had another client uh pretty much shot in the head, up close range, and survives.
Wow.
Like just stuff that's happening, and I'm just like, that had to be God. That
Yes.
had to be something that was there, that was present. That I'm like, yes.
Yeah. That's serious. Yeah. We don't realize how real God is until we're like faced with these stories, right? And
Hmm.
we don't realize how good we have it too until we hear like these stories of people who really had it really bad.
Hmm.
So I love that you're doing that work in Baltimore. It's needed because of the pandemic, right? You wrote a book about coronavirus, but
Hmm.
because of the pandemic, we're seeing even more of a push for mental health. How do you think the pandemic has affected relationships and just the environment on mental health overall?
Oh my goodness. Since the pandemic, before the pandemic, I had 40 clients. I was working in one office. Since the pandemic, I started working out of two offices, and now I have 140 clients. So, like,
Really?
the demand for clients has increased like tremendously. And then on the other side, like, suicide rate in younger people, like I'm seeing like 7, 8 year olds that are having suicidal thoughts and talking about jumping out windows. And I'm like, before the pandemic, I didn't see it as such a young age, but since the pandemic, now it's like a younger generation are, thinking, considering suicide. And then also the murder rates. So a lot of
Yeah.
like criminal activity, domestic violence. I have had so many domestic cases that I had to deal with, different families. And then
Yeah.
even within the family, child abuse. Since the pandemic, people have really,
Why do you
they've
think
been
this
too
is
close.
happening?
It's the closeness, They don't have
Ah,
that outlet. Like kids,
yeah.
the kids weren't going to school, and then the couples, probably financial distress on top of that,
Yeah, yeah.
being too connected because maybe job loss. And then
Yeah.
the kids, for the younger kids, the biggest thing they keep telling me is they cannot stand the isolation. Like being away from their
Hmm.
friends and being in the house, that's like the worst thing you can do to a teen or a small kid. Tell them to stay in their house, and there's not
Yeah.
much you can do.
Yeah, so crazy. I agree. I think that it's hard to the isolation. I know I was speaking to one of my friends and he was like, "Oh, my kid was fine. They didn't mind the isolation." I'm like, "Yeah, but you got to think about the privilege. You know what I'm saying, that your kid has, and that some children, some youth don't have those privileges. So this pandemic has weighed on them so heavy,
Mm-hmm.
and we cannot underestimate that, right?"
Absolutely.
Yeah. What is the church role in this pandemic?
I would say to can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hmm.
I would say to be like an inspiration and to kind of help people find salvation. Like I feel like honestly, I feel like this has been a good thing for the church. It seems like it's a bad thing because they closed a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
churches, but they expanded the reach to a lot of people that weren't going to church. They can get on live now.
yeah, yeah.
A lot of people that may not have considered even walking in a church building are considering because they like there's a lot going on.
No, I agree. I agree with that. There's so much going on now that it's like so weird, right?
Hmm.
And I do think it's a good thing because I see a lot of people coming back to the church and realizing they do need God, right? And I think the church has more responsibility to reach out to people, and to show them the love of God, right? I think
Hmm.
that is definitely part of the responsibility of the church. I want to shift a little bit because we've had these private conversations, but I want to kind of bring in public about singleness, right?
Hmm.
Being a single woman in these days, in our position as educated, progressive, spiritual young women of we just happen to be young women of color, but still
Yeah.
young, young, but
Hmm.
in that definitely
Yeah.
age where you're not exactly in your 20s, right? But you're not in your 20s, not exactly. But now you're progressing, you're mature, you kind of know what you want. How hard is that, like doing that balancing act of singleness and during this time?
It's pretty hard because like since the pandemic, you start to like really notice how single you are because like for me, I live by myself and it's like before the pandemic, I wasn't in my home as much. But now
Right.
when I come home, I realize that I'm home alone. A lot of people are isolating. A lot of people aren't getting out. So I noticed my singleness more. So it kind of
Hmm.
increased my, I guess, desire to have a husband, have kids.
Yeah.
Prior to the pandemic, I mean, I still kind of do what I want. I still travel a lot,
Yes, of
but
course.
even more before the pandemic, I was doing a lot more. And then since the pandemic, I've kind of slowed down and kind of sat in my feelings, like what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, I agree. When I was in New York City, I never even noticed my singleness. I
Mhm.
never even cared about it. It was so much going on. It was so much to do. You
Yes.
can go outside and have a conversation with a friend. New York City is a very different city, right? You never feel like you're by yourself because you can walk down the street. Some people call it sexual harassment. I don't. Okay. And when somebody be like, "Oh, you fine," and you be like, "Oh, I am fine," you know what I'm saying? Or
Yeah.
guys weren't scared to approach you. Now it seems like the only way you can find someone is by like online dating. I know a lot of church people are against that, but it's the new wave of kind of like, how do you meet people, right? And I think that's what happened to me too. I was especially aware of my singleness during this pandemic, but even just leaving a big city like New York. I've been out of New York for a long time, but I can see the difference even now. What do you feel about that and like dating today, and all the pressures that come with that?
For me, I guess I don't completely have the pressures because just the season that I'm in a season of kind of like building myself and
Yes.
growing personally. But if I was in that season, it would definitely be a struggle because I wouldn't know where to go. Where am I find a husband at?
Yeah.
Nobody's outside. Everybody's sitting house on their couch.
Yes. Yeah, it's the struggle is real, but I will say that there is something focused on. One of my other friend Stacy, she said, I'm just married to my assignment," and I love that because
That's good.
I feel like even with myself, right, I had to refocus, right, my
Hmm.
energy on just trying to be like to focus on singleness. Okay, no. I'm whole, even in my singleness, right?
Yes.
So I'm still traveling. I'm still doing what I need to do. There's so much to be done. Actually, sometimes dating can actually be the distraction, right?
Hmm.
Like, or trying to put so much energy into, I gotta find this man of God, I gotta find this husband, that it can become distraction. So God's timing has become everything to me.
And God's choice. I want the man that God chooses.
Yes, I love that. Not just God's timing, but God's choice. That's a good one, sis.
Yes.
Yes, that's a good one. So I want to talk about a little bit about your. I know you talked about some of your struggles growing up in school,
Mhm.
and just not thinking you were smart enough. How did you overcome that? Talk a little bit about that.
So I was born pretty much with a developmental delay. I didn't start speaking till like three something,
Mm-hmm.
probably like about 3.5. That's when I actually started speaking. So I had
Wow.
a speech delay. So when I started school, I was kind of like delayed. Not so much academically, but more so like I didn't speak as much. I was kind of quiet, and they had a lot of like they couldn't really test me because I just did not do the work. Like I don't know
Right.
what it was, but I just did not test it. I didn't test it right. They couldn't really test me, so they put me in a self-contained classroom. But being in that self-contained classroom, there were some kids that seen me and they were like, "Okay, she's stupid, she's retarded." They would pretty
Yeah.
much bully me for being in a self-contained classroom. And then so I would a lot of times we still had like electives, so we still have PE, we still have music. They still included
Yeah.
us in those other activities, but in those transitions, that's when I got a lot of bullying happened. And I believed the thing is the fact that I actually believed a lot of stuff that they said, so it kind of hit home because you're
Mm.
saying this to me and I'm really believing it because nobody else is saying anything else to me. And I'm in this
Wow.
classroom and everybody around me, you know, they have their situations. So I start to believe that, this is what I have. This is all I have. This is all I'm capable of. And I feel like I believe that for years. I didn't get out of special ed. Well, I stepped up. I guess about probably in the fifth grade, I stepped up and I was more in like inclusion classes. So
Hmm.
they would put me in with like some classes I would be in self-contained, and some classes I would be in with like more students, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So they stepped me up, and then in the eighth grade, it was actually my best friend Martine. I met her, and she was just the biggest inspiration. And it was like that's when I had an epiphany because she came and she was just like, "Girl, you can do whatever you want." And she was like, "You got it." She was like, "Why you
I
think you
love
can't
it.
do that? You can do that." But the whole time I was just telling myself and believing everything that everybody else had told me, okay, I can't do it. But then I
Yeah.
realized when I started to make an effort that I could do everything that she said I could do, and
That's
everything that I
right.
tried, I could do it. And so it was really my mindset. It wasn't that I was slow, that anything was wrong with me, but that I had a mindset that something was wrong with me because I had heard it so much.
Wow, I love that. I just want to hone in on that because that's so powerful what you just said about how your mindset, how you can believe what people are saying because nobody else is telling you different. And that's why it's so important that you hear different because you can be in a
Mhm.
box and people can tell you you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid for so long, or you're slow, 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 or you don't have it, you can't be
Yeah.
anything for so long that you pick up that mindset, you start to believe that about yourself, and it really takes on in your spirit, man, right? And you got to break yourself out of that false identity that is of the
Hmm.
devil. That's what Satan does. He tries to keep you
Yes.
in a box, right? And so that way you can never see what God has called you to, what God really wants of you, how God sees you. And as long as
Hmm.
you don't see yourself how God sees you, the devil's winning, right? Because that means that he can put his own identity, or he can have people put their identity on you. And
That's
so I
it.
love that. I love that you had that God sent someone like your best friend Martine to come and step in and
Mhm.
say, girl, you could do it. And look at you now. You got master's degrees, counselor. Look at that. How
Yes.
else would you did you break that identity? And what would you tell someone who's suffering from not knowing who they are because nobody's ever told them anything different?
Pretty much I broke the identities because I started, like you said, I started believing something else. She, like you
Mm-hmm.
said earlier, she was feeding me something different versus what everybody else was putting on my table. So I started
Yeah.
eating something different. I started believing in myself and I started making an effort. Before I was just kind of, I was there, I was present, but I wasn't trying. I wasn't making an effort, and I was believing what everybody said. But once I started believing, my mindset changed. Then I tested out, completely out of special ed. Come ninth, pretty much in ninth grade, I was in all regular classes, honor roll, doing good. But it was just all, it was a mindset thing. And then I went to, got my bachelor's in business, got my master's in social work. Um, Mind you, I graduated A's, like all A's and
Yes.
B's, like top of my
Yes.
class. Like all of this was inside of me, but I had no idea.
That's good. That's good. I love that. And there's so much more inside of you. I know it because we
Yes.
we spend time together. So the end has not come yet to what God has in store for Christy Greene. I love it. So I want to shift gears a little bit. I love that because I think that's going to be an inspiration to a lot of people who are feeling like, even for myself, right? Someone who's always been
Hmm.
told that they could do it. There have been moments when I felt like maybe I can't, God. Maybe you
Hmm.
putting too much energy into me. Maybe you see
Yeah.
more in me than I see in myself. But then that's when God shows up and he says, yes, I do see more in you than you see in yourself. And this is the way I want you to see you, right? And that's a process that takes time. And
Hmm.
so we all have at one point struggled with our identity, and it's a daily affirmational process that we walk it
Yes.
out and tell ourselves that we know. I have affirmations on my wall. I am this. I can do this. I
Hmm.
will do this. I
Absolutely.
will be this, right? I say this to myself because I believe that that's what God has for me. And so as long as I believe it, I believe God is going to manifest
Hmm.
everything that's
That's
inside
good.
of us, right?
That's it.
To do. The power of manifestation is so
It's
strong and
true.
so important. And I love the way what you do with connections. I think you're a good connector. You're always connecting people. How can people find connections during this time when so many of us are isolated?
During this time, I would say, like for me, this is what we kind of did. With my job at All Walks of Life, we started a global village network. So we started a network to where it didn't go to the full potential that we wanted to go, but pretty much, I think 3 times a day, people can log on. So I did a story time group that I would do with my clients where they
Oh,
could
that's
log on. We
nice.
did story time. We did groups to where we would talk about like emotional healing, trauma, grief. Sometimes we just have a party, like we do vision boards. We did
Yeah.
and then we even had a group where we had movie nights where
Yeah.
once a week, all the clients would get together. We'd all go on Zoom. We'd watch a movie together, We
Yes.
discuss it. It was just always like we engaged each other. And it's still going on. Like we just recently we stopped, we took a little break and now we're starting our groups back up. And we're going to be pretty much, that's how everybody can stay connected through the Global Village Network.
I love
And
that.
eventually they want to have it like almost every hour where you can log on and you can pretty much be in a group. You can do something. You're connecting with
Yeah.
people. But also there's all the like resources for the community. They got Boys and Girls Club, YMCA. Like there's so
Yeah.
many ways you can connect, and you just got to look for those resources.
Yeah, I love this global village network though, because I love that whole idea of getting together with people in your village and sharing something. And
And resources.
my dad has been doing some awesome things during this time. Like he had
Mm-hmm.
Zoom sessions with his
Yeah.
friends. We at one time we was doing Zoom family reunion sessions and just going around. Yeah, we was
That is
zooming
fun.
it out. You know what I'm saying? So it was
Mm-hmm.
really a thing. So there are ways, creative ways that we can connect, right? Even during a time where some of us may feel isolated, you don't have to feel isolated. There is resources out there for you to feel connected in some kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I love social media. Even though a lot of people talk bad about social media, it is a way for us to stay
It's definitely
connected
a
during
resource.
these weird times. Yeah, it's definitely it has its downsides, of course, but these are the
Mm-hmm.
upsides, right? The
Yes.
ways we can stay connected to one another in this metaverse or whatever they want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
and share our feelings and our thoughts and encourage one another through a platform that
Yes.
would not be available if this pandemic had hit, like when the last pandemic hit. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
1918, they didn't have social media, right? So
We'd have been lost.
right, exactly. So I am grateful of what technology has done to keep us connected and
Mm-hmm.
together. Um, and I want to just lastly talk about your service to the church and your
Mm-hmm.
community. You serve the youth department and you do so many things with the youth, including doing activities with them. I
Oh
have
yeah, we
had the
do a
honor of
lot.
helping you so many times
Yes,
with
I appreciate you.
yes, with the children. And sometimes I feel like in the way that you serve, it's hard to get sometimes the love, get it back, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes you are a person who pours out and pours out and pours out. I found that for myself too in different
Mm-hmm.
areas, that sometimes you feel like, okay, God, I need somebody to fill my cup back up. How have
Mm-hmm.
you dealt with those times of like, God, I need some water like now?
I go and get some food. So in those moments, I don't quit. I normally take a pause. That's normally when I go on vacation. I'll call you,
Yes.
I'll call somebody. We need to do something. I go on vacation and I just kind of refill my own cup. And I'll go to another church service in another state, or I'll,
Yeah.
go somewhere. Like I really enjoy snorkeling. So I'll go snorkeling, or just something
Oh,
that kind of gives me kind of peace of mind.
I love that.
Or my family, like that is my biggest escape too. So if I really am going through
Yeah.
a lot and I just need somebody to fill my cup, I drive up and go see my mama, go see my
Yeah.
nieces, go see my nephews.
Yeah, I love that. Just really taking some time off for your own mental self care. We've done a lot of good mental self care together.
Yes.
But yeah, I think you have to be responsible for filling your own cup. I love that. In whatever way you can, whether it's going to whatever makes you happy. I mean, sometimes
Hmm.
I've just taken a ride down to the waterfront and just sat down there and
Yeah.
just been like, thank you, God. I'm grateful for this moment. I'm thankful,
Hmm.
thankful for my life, and just talk to God. Whatever it does for you to practice self-care. I know we are people that are really, we love people. We are givers.
Hmm.
We give of ourselves. We try to serve. And sometimes I know we find ourselves to like an empty place, like God, does
Yeah.
anybody see me? Is anybody noticing me? But God has always proven himself, right?
Yes,
He's always
absolutely.
proven himself. He's always come through for us. He always manifests who he is. And so don't get weary in good doing, right?
Absolutely.
That's really the scripture when I think about you, is never get weary in good doing, because God is the ultimate rewarder. And I'm so happy to have you as a friend, a mentor, a counselor, and just the way you pour out love to your church family, your friends, your community. It's really a blessing to see. What do you
Yes.
see going forward for 2022? Like, what's the vision?
Personally, or for everybody?
Yeah, for both.
All right, we'll start with me because I'm not quite sure about everybody. But for me, for 2022, I guess this year I would like to publish a children's ministry curriculum.
Nice.
I would also like to, I guess, like start to establish like my own personal like private practice. So I really need to take this test. So I need
Yes.
to study. more, and I would like to, I guess, just grow deeper in my calling, in ministry.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
right now I'm studying to be an ordained minister. So hopefully
Oh,
getting that. And for everybody, I would just like to see a lot of more love worldwide. I would like to see an
mm-hmm.
increase in violence. I would like to see an increase in people kind of being supportive and being there for one another. And I would like to see the community kind of heal as a whole.
Yeah. That's important. Yeah, I know. I feel like this has increased something that I haven't seen in years in people. You know what I'm saying? The
The
need
bad
for,
side of people.
oh my gosh, yes, the bad center side of people. Like, what's going on?
Mm.
Yes. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to interview with me. Yay!
Yeah.
We have one more interview for the month, guys. We are interviewing Christopher Lawrence tomorrow. He has an awesome story. He's an awesome brother. He's also a servant in Christ. So please stay tuned for his interview. But also, I want to thank my sister, my
Thank
friend,
you. Thank you.
Christy Greene, for joining us. We're going to have so many more great things that we do in Christy, and we're going to be traveling. So, of
Yes, girl.
course, we got to talk. We have travel secrets already. So,
Yes.
we would definitely, yes, yes, totally. But yes, thank you guys for joining me. Stay blessed, everybody.
Thank you. See ya.